Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of SummerSlam 2001. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is for the WWE Intercontinental Championship. It is Lance Storm versus Edge. I thought this was a good opening matchup for SummerSlam 2001. Back and forth matchup between both Lance Storm and Edge. Lance was keeping the pace of the match. Lance goes for a springboard, but is met with a power slam from Edge. Edge then hits a spin kick on Lance Storm. Lance then goes for a Hurricanrana, but Edge hits a powerbomb instead. Lance then applies a single leg crab on Edge in the middle of the ring. Christian is here. Christian then goes to spear Storm, missed, and ends up hitting Edge. Edge then gets up, hits a DDT on Lance Storm, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time, new WWE Intercontinental Champion is Edge. Hats off to Edge for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Spike Dudley and APA versus Test and the Dudley Boys. I thought this was a really good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams. Farouk ends up hitting a devastating spine buster on Devon Dudley in the middle of the ring. The Dudley Boys and Test were keeping the pace of the match though. Dudley Boys pull out a table from underneath the ring. Bradshaw then hits a powerbomb on Test. Spike then goes for his signature acid drop on Test, but Test throws him out of the ring on top to the table on the outside. Bradshaw then hits his clothesline from Hell on Test. Shane McMahon is here. Shane ends up hitting Bradshaw with a chair shot. Test then goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Test and the Dudley Boys. Hats off to Test and the Dudley Boys for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is for the WWE Light Heavyweight Championship as well as the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. It is Tajiri versus X-Pac. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Tajiri and X-Pac. Tajiri hits a standing moonsault on X-Pac. X-Pac then gets up, hits a spin kick on Tajiri. Tajiri then applies his signature tarantula on X-Pac. X-Pac then gets out of the hold, hits a senton on Tajiri on the outside. X-Pac then hits an X-Factor on Tajiri for a near fall. Albert is here. Tajiri then sprays mist into Albert's face. X-Pac capitalizes on that distraction and hits the X-Factor on Tajiri, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time, new WWE Light Heavyweight Champion is X-Pac. Hats off to X-Pac for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Rhino versus Chris Jericho. I thought this was a relatively good matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between both Rhino and Jericho. Rhino and Jericho both exchange in the middle of the ring. Jericho then hits a spin kick on Rhino. Jericho then hits a springboard dropkick on Rhino. Jericho then goes for a top rope maneuver but is met with a spear from Rhino. Jericho then gets up, hits a springboard moonsault on Rhino. Jericho then hits a lion salt. Rhino then applies Jericho's walls of Jericho on Jericho. Jericho breaks the hold. Rhino then goes for a gourd but missed. Jericho then applies his signature walls of Jericho on Rhino. And your winner of the match by submission is Chris Jericho. Hats off to Chris Jericho for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WWE Hardcore Championship. It's a ladder match. It is Jeff Hardy versus RVD. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between both Jeff Hardy and RVD. Jeff hits a springboard whisper in the wind on RVD on the outside. RVD then gets up, hits a leg drop off the barricade on Jeff. Jeff then gets up, hits a springboard moonsault on RVD on the ladder. RVD then hits a rolling senton on Jeff. RVD then hits a suplex on Jeff off the ladder. RVD then climbs the ladder, grabs the belt, and your winner of the match, and at that time, new WWE Hardcore Champion is RVD. Hats off to RVD for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a steel cage matchup for the WWE Tag Team Championships as well as the WCW Tag Team Championships. It is DDP and Kanyon versus Undertaker and Kane. I thought this was a relatively good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams with Kane and the Undertaker keeping the pace of the match. Kane hits a devastating chokeslam on Kanyon. Undertaker then tells DDP to leave the match. Undertaker then hits a chokeslam on DDP, and then Taker hits the last ride on DDP in the middle of the ring, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time, new WCW or WWE Tag Team Champions are Undertaker and Kane. Hats off to the Undertaker and Kane for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WWE Championship. It is Kurt Angle versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between both Angle and Austin. Kurt Angle and Austin both exchange in the middle of the ring. Kurt then applies an ankle lock on Austin, but Austin breaks the hold. Kurt then hits 7 German suplexes on Austin in the middle of the ring. Austin then gets up, hits a stunner for a near fall on Kurt Angle. Angle then gets up, applies another ankle lock on Stone Cold, but Austin breaks the hold. Angle then hits a moonsault off the top rope on Austin. Austin then gets up, hits a stunner for another near fall on Kurt Angle. Angle then gets up, hits an angle slam on Austin. Austin ends up hitting the referee. Another referee comes to the match. He ends up hitting a stunner on that referee. And then another ref came in. He ends up hitting that ref with the title. Angle then capitalizes on this, hits the angle slam on Stone Cold Steve Austin. And your winner of the match by disqualification is Kurt Angle. A couple of things I want to say about this matchup quickly, man. Number one, this was a fantastic match. And to be honest with you, this should have been the main event. I mean, both Kurt Angle and Stone Cold Steve Austin, there were so many spots in this matchup. I mean, so many stunners for a near fall. Kurt Angle would, get out of, the stunner. Kurt Angle applying the ankle lock multiple times and, Austin breaking the hold. There's a lot of spots in this matchup. And to be honest with you, this should have been the main event of SummerSlam 2001, in my honest opinion. But all in all, hats off to Kurt Angle for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of SummerSlam 2001. It is The Rock versus Booker T for the WCW Championship. I thought this was a relatively good matchup. Back and forth matchup between The Rock and Booker T. Rock was keeping the pace of the match. Rock ends up hitting a rock bottom on Shane on the outside. And then Rock Bottom hits his signature rock bottom on Booker T. Pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match, and at that time, new WCW Heavyweight Champion is The Rock. A couple of things I'm going to say about SummerSlam 2001 before I get out of here, man. This was a really solid event from top to bottom, in my honest opinion. I'm not going to sit here and say this was the best SummerSlam of all time. But this was pretty damn close. I mean, the opening matchup, Lance Storm versus Edge, there's a lot of people that do not like Lance Storm. But in my honest opinion, Lance Storm can wrestle. And to have the opening matchup for the Intercontinental Championship be Lance Storm versus Edge, I thought it was a fantastic matchup, man. It was a great opening matchup for SummerSlam 2001. The 6-man tag team match between Spike Dudley, APA, and Test and the Dudley Boys, fantastic matchup in itself. And then you also have Tajiri versus X-Pac, which I was kind of apprehensive on this match, but honestly, Tajiri and X-Pac really brought it. And to be honest with you, I was kind of hoping Tajiri would get the win, but X-Pac ended up capitalizing on the distraction from Albert and allowed X-Pac to get the win in that matchup. Rhino Chris Jericho was also a good match. One of the best matches on here for me, besides maybe Kurt Angle versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, was Jeff Hardy versus RVD in that ladder match for the WWE Hardcore Championship. Absolutely fantastic match. You know RVD is going to do absolutely insane stuff in the ring as well as Jeff Hardy. It just made for a great matchup, bell to bell. So, again, that was a really good matchup, and hats off to RVD for getting the win in that match, and at that time becoming the Hardcore Champion. And yes, the main event was okay, but to me, the main event of SummerSlam 2001 should have been Kurt Angle versus Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE Championship for, multiple reasons. Number one, it's for the WWE Championship. I understand that this pay-per-view was all about the invasion. You had ECW involved, you had WCW involved, obviously you had WWE involved, but it being a WWE pay-per-view, this should have been for the WWE Championship. It should have been the main event. To be honest with you, I think Kurt Angle versus Stone Cold Steve Austin was a lot better of a match than Rock and Booker T, in my personal opinion. And again, like I had stated, it should have been, Angle and Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE Championship should have been the main event of SummerSlam 2001. But all in all, if I had to give SummerSlam 2001 a rating from 1 out of 10, I'm going to give it a solid 7.5, man. This was a really good pay-per-view from top to bottom, and I fairly enjoyed it very much. So I'm going to give SummerSlam 2001 a solid 7.5 at best. So this is my review of SummerSlam 2001. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic.